Welcome to what I think is titled Bringing Forth Books into the World. Inner Intellect Salon. I have done a bunch of internet intellect salons, but I think everyone's a little different. I sort of see these as a collaborative exercise. I am not smarter than the collective wisdom of this group. So excited to learn from you all as well. I have a lot of ideas around these things, but I'm still learning too. Like a lot of these questions, I'm basically wrapping up a second book now and I'm thinking about them again. And it's weird, it's confusing, it's hard. And it's also sort of fits into this broader context of like, if you want to communicate ideas to an audience or the public over a lifetime and a career, what does that look like? What does that feel like? How do you think about it at an abstract level? Is something I think about a lot. So roughly around books, we can dive into other stuff, but maybe it'd be helpful just to like go around the room and have people share a bit about what they're bringing to this session right here. How are you feeling right now? What's something that's energizing you? What's like a question you might want to explore with the group? Do you want to kick us off, Michael? You're in my top left.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Michael Dean. I work with this course called Rite of Passage, which helps people start a writing practice online. And so this year I started this project called Essay Architecture. So I used to be an architect. I've kind of brought a lot of that thinking into the world of writing. And so, yeah, I've released like 4 chapters of this book so far. And so I'm kind of like sharing it on Substack in real time, with the goal of finishing it by the end of this year, and then hoping that at some point next year I can edit it, polish it, and release it.
Awesome. Trey?
Yeah, my in a previous life I did political research, and since then just every so often I ended up doing a deep dive in some random topic that interests me that's come off. But then once I get the knowledge or satisfy my curiosity, it's like I was like, yeah, there's a book here. But then I move on to something else and never get going. And so um I find I want to at least at some point put it together, even if it doesn't get in book form, but start sharing what I find. So
Love that. Ellen?
Hello?
Hey.
Using Creative Commons licenses. So not necessarily making your money from, I guess, selling a book, maybe doing like a Kickstarter or something, people getting their name in the credits when you first release the book. But I'm interested in how can people make a business model work and also release their work under Creative Commons licenses.
Awesome. Technically, I don't really know much about that, but we can definitely explore kind of how to think about that too. Billy?
Cool. Hey, I'm Billy. I'm currently on a sabbatical from a tech career. So I've been on sabbatical for like a year now. I'm just kind of doing fun personal projects right now, figuring out what I'm going to do next. And one of the things I do is I have a blog, write a bunch of kind of like personal essays or kind of like journal stuff online. And I've been interested in just this idea of like sharing knowledge and kind of like telling stories, both kind of like fiction or nonfiction type stuff. So yeah, the idea of like maybe writing a book or like using books as a medium to share things is interesting to me.
Awesome. Norman?
Yeah, hi. I've I'm here pretty much to learn, seeing as how you're in the middle of launching your second book. I know you've been working on it for a while. Um, I've launched the memoir recently, learned a lot from that, but I think the next step then is to optimize that specific process there. How do you manage your energy, drafting, refining, preparing for distribution, launching it, marketing it, etc., but in a very cozy, humane, self-paced, natural way. There's this like certain negative energy that I have, or like this connotation I have, just like SEOing the whole thing, turning it into like a giant blueprint funnel thing that I just don't like. It seems very anti-humane to me. And the way that I see you talking about your book in a very like organic manner, that's something that I resonate with more. So that's what I'm here to learn more about.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely resonate with that as well. It's I feel like putting a book out in the world challenges like every insecurity you have too. So it's like this guaranteed personal growth journey. Faye.
Thanks. I'm Faye. I'm located in Washington, D.C. I'm here because I recently read Paul's book on the pathless path, and the topic of looking at books was really interesting to me. I do a lot of writing in my career. I've written books and articles, but right now I'm kind of playing around with the idea of more personal interests and playing with the book form and just want to do some experimenting around that. So the way you approached your first book and my interest in experimenting with this format kind of drew me to this session. Thanks.
Awesome. Dana?
Hi, my name is Dana. I also recently read The Pathless Path, and I was just excited that you're hosting a salon. Just want to learn more about the process of writing a book, and I just want to, I guess, know what was your process in, getting unstuck when you were writing a book? Like um, first of all, what drew you to that topic? I'm assuming, it's experience, but I mean, I'm sure you've had a lot of experiences. So why focus on that aspect as opposed to other aspects of, your experience of leaving your job and not knowing how everything will pan out? Yeah, so I'm just mainly here to learn more, and as we go along, I'm sure I'll have questions. Thank you.
What do you mean by focus on some things over others?
So in the pathless path, I'm assuming when you were writing it, there were other things going on, right? Like in your life. It just how to narrow down. I guess for me, like, when I'm thinking about writing something, I find myself kind of getting lost into many things that I want to include. And it just, I drift kind of away from the main topic. And just for me, I just want to see what your process is like to narrow down on what's essential or what will drive your message across.
Yeah, so in interesting, it seems like everyone's broadly interested in books and this process, so that's exciting. I thought it might be interesting just to show you what I started with. So this is literally my first document. And this was not the subtitle I ended up with, but I think this was a couple months into writing. Basically, this is like my biggest piece of advice to people is open a Word doc or Google Doc and start actually creating like the structure, like a table of contents like this. And if you look through this, it's pretty messy. Right now, this is basically like a history of work, like taking the leap, getting lost on the pathless path, creating your own work, but it's very messy. A lot of these are like empty. or they're like pasted blog posts, right? So I have like empty things. A lot of this didn't really end up making it into the book, but it was mostly me pasting blog posts I had. So it's really messy. And the biggest challenge I realized early on was you can't use links in a book. You can't say like, oh, this trend happened and then link to that and expect people to go. You actually have to like rewrite that. The other thing I realized was that I repeat myself all the time. So I have been exploring this topic of work for years and writing on my blog, writing in a newsletter. And so I mentioned like the same David Autor study of middle skill jobs, probably like 10 times in 10 different articles, right? And so when I put stuff in, I realized those two things. One, you can't link anymore. So I'm going to have to get better at explaining what I'm trying to say, which was really cool because I loved that challenge. And two, I couldn't just repeat the same stories over and over again. Now, at this point, I had no idea if I could actually pull off a book. I basically figured I could write something. And for me, like, I didn't set the expectation really high at the beginning. I actually started out calling it saying, like, I'm going to publish an ebook on our modern relationship with work. And my thinking was, I'm just going to like share all the like facts. Like, here are all the facts about the history of work, the current state of work, all the things that are changing, maybe a little of my personal story. And what I realized quickly is that I needed to tell the personal story. I think personally, that was like an edge for me. That was a challenge for me. And two, the book is pretty boring. And I wouldn't actually be excited about it without like weaving in my own personal story. It's like, why I kept feeling like, who's going to care about this? Why would people think it matters? And I just kept coming back to this idea, like, I need to like bring forth that emotion of why it matters so much to me. So I'll pause there, and I don't want this to be solely me just sort of like sharing, but happy to take this in many different directions. This is a good way for me to understand my process too.
I guess one way if I could interject here, I like to look at like the best way to judge whether or not a book, at least for me, is worth reading is to look at the table of contents, and you play this guessing game where you look at the chapter titles and ask yourself, if I were to write those chapter titles for myself, what would I add in there? And there's this two-way conversation that happens between me and the author. So my first question, I guess, is what is your criteria for preparing what the outlines are for a book, or at least, using the pathless path as an example? And I think it was mentioned just earlier, right? Like you may dive too deep into something and then you drift off and then you realize that some parts are relevant, some parts are not that valuable. How do you go about drafting a table of contents and then refining it over time?
So I actually did not start with the table of contents. I am like the extreme, like right to figure out what you're saying. So I would say I sort of write. So I dumped all my blog posts in and started like structuring. So I started like labeling what are these sections about, right? And so in the initial section, it's just introduction, right? And the pathless path in this original book was not idea I weaved throughout. It was just an idea. I had like 3 paragraphs at the beginning, and I never mentioned the phrase pathless path again. That idea basically took over the book as I went. So that was like behind the scenes. And then the high level chapters, like I have how we became workers, beyond all or nothing leaps, getting lost on the pathless path, creating your own work, designing your life. And basically, like, those mostly ended up being like sub chapters. But I was starting to figure it out. I actually have this diagram I'll share this as well. So I have a pretty long post on how I did all this. So this is the diagram of how the chapters. So this was January 2021. You'll see these, and basically like they started like merging into different things. So the introduction actually became chapter 2. And I wrote a whole new introduction. And that was because like I didn't really figure out what the book was about until like halfway to 3/4 through. And then some of the other sections either sort of like morphed into other ones or turned into completely other things. And yeah, it was just like constant rearranging. This diagram is kind of confusing, but as you can see, it's kind of like everything comes apart and comes together. And so this diagram is sort of like how I think about it. These two different modes. Top down is the outlining. You're starting with the structure and the story. And then bottom up is like research, writing, editing. You're just like, you're sitting down and you're powering through a chapter or you're editing a chapter. And so I actually separate these two modes. When I'm writing, I'll just write and I don't worry about the structure. I just write, or edit. And then I'll either pop out and try to get feedback from someone. I'll often like send stuff to people who I trust, which is a very small number of people. Or often I'm even using I've been using Claude for structure and feedback on this one. I can talk about that as well. And then I'll go like restructure a little, I'll rename things, move some chapters around, and then I'll go back down. But I'd say 80% of my time is in the writing and editing and figuring out things. And part of that is coming from my strategy consulting experience where we'd be in these like 6-month long, super complex projects, and you would not know where you'd end up. But you do enough of those projects where you just kind of like power through and you learn to trust the process. So the entire process of like writing a book is basically just being comfortable with the dual emotions of I need to finish this book. It's so important. I'm going to do it. And I have no idea what I'm doing. This stuff is crap. This doesn't make any sense. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it off. Yeah, I'll link to that.
Paul, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting to hear you say that you were halfway to 3/4 of the way through before you knew what the book was about. And it's also interesting to hear you say at the beginning of the process, your personal story was not really prominently on your mind for sharing. How do those two overlay? Because as a reader of your book, it's really hard to imagine your book without your personal story throughout.
Yeah, so I think what happened is a lot of my writing did have my personal story in it, but I was not a good personal sharer of like the feelings and experiences and bringing things alive. So I had this gap between like my memories of stuff and strong feelings, and my ability to communicate that on the page. And so I actually talked to a writing coach, Sasha Chapin, like 3 months into the process. And he basically like skimmed through this. I think it was a later version, but the whole part about my health crisis and like early internship and like how I felt like just so broken by the experience in those early jobs. He was like, that's the best part. He's like, just lean into that as hard as possible. And because you're a very analytical, like fact-based writer, you will never be like too fluffy and too flowy with emotions. So that was what enabled me to shift from like, oh, this is an ebook about our relationship to work to this is something that is going to like completely take me away. And I loved the challenge of bringing alive the experiences. And it was extremely emotional. I think this is why I found it very satisfying. A lot of times I'd reach these points where I'm just stuck and like I have to go for like a walk for 2 hours to like figure out what's happening. Why am I stuck? Why can't I express this? What really happened? How did that really influence my life? And yeah, it was really intense experience too.
So there were some like sections in the Pathless Path that were, incredibly vulnerable and very open. And I guess, for me, like I find it very tough to be that vulnerable in my writing, and I think that's where the best writing happens. I know that like logically, right? But I guess what I'm wondering is how did you get over, sharing that much with other people, because I struggle with that, and I always think, does anybody really want to, like, who wants to read about, but I enjoy it when people do it, but I like on some level there is kind of a bit of a block around sharing personal things, and I'm just wondering, what would you say got you over that?
Yeah, so by the time I was writing my book, I had shared hundreds of things online and thousands of like social media posts. So I had some experience, and my experience was one, those were always the posts I was happiest to share, the more personal ones. And the response was almost uniformly positive. And I have gotten criticism. They're mostly like ad hominem attacks. It's like not people that actually read my stuff. They'll like attack my identity or like me as a person. They're not actually engaging with my work and saying, "Hey, this could be better." Um, and so, like, I think some of that is unavoidable. I think the short answer is you never fully get over it. Um, my second book is even more personal and like way less citations. The Pathless Path has like 200 plus citations. This second book will have like 15 to 20. And so yeah, I'm pretty much done with the book, and like I'm feeling really uncomfortable about it.
So
I've
would you
gained a
say,
little confidence based on my wife reading it, and like this is really good, and like she can't put it down. So that is encouraging. But yeah, I think it's just like it's hard.
would you say there is like some kind of mental model or framework that you use when you're writing to get you over that like vulnerability hurdle, I guess? Like is there some tool or something that you can get yourself in to just kind of get over that?
How much writing have you shared in public?
Not much, just a few actually, a few blog posts.
Yeah, I think at the beginning it's a volume thing. Like you just have to do it. Like I think at the beginning it's just like a power through, and one experience, like what often happens to people at the beginning, it's like, okay, put this stuff out there, and it's like, okay, no one said anything. And then also they're like, wait a minute, I do want more people to read my stuff. People aren't even paying attention yet. So that was my experience for like years writing my stuff online. Now it's people are responding, and it's almost like uniformly positive. Like I have not really gotten I've not gotten any direct negative feedback that like people emailed me. 100% of the emails I've gotten from my book are positive. Now there are like comments on like Amazon and Goodread, like this is the worst thing I've ever read, and I put it down after like 30 pages. It's like fine, the book's not for you. So I think that's another thing is like really defining who you're writing for, right?
Mm.
If somebody who like thinks imagining new paths is stupid, reads my book, one, I'm like, why the heck are they reading my book? I don't understand that. But like, two, if I get feedback from them, like, it's worthless because like I'm not actually writing for them. So I think defining that can help, but yeah, I think it's a volume thing. Anyone else have any reflections on this? Norman?
Yeah, the thing is when it comes to having your work out in the world, your your body of work is designed to have polarity when it comes to your audience. You have the people who will resonate with it, and you have the people who don't. And in the realm of the people who don't, there are subcategories. So you have those who will respond by attacking you ad hominem, as what Paul said, and you have the others who will respond by telling you why they don't resonate. And in depending on the framing or the semantics of those, you can see that as, oh no, they hate my stuff, but actually there's a lesson and there's some level of wisdom in there, in that you are now clearly seeing the boundaries of where your audience lies. And that's where the polarity part comes in. There's a constraint, there's a border where you have the people who will follow you and you have the people who won't follow you. And now it's a matter of your relationship with that border. How strong do you want that border to be? And I think, Dana, your question is something that resonates a lot with how when I started doing all my stuff, like writing and podcasting, etc., where I was really worried about people's judgment of me. But with any piece that you release out into the world, what happens is that they have established this relationship with their image of you, not you directly. So they have this emotional response to your words, but not you as a person. And then they project that onto you as a person if they are so emotionally compelled to reach out and, attack or whatever. But then you can actually find and navigate a middle ground around that. And that's an instinct thing. That's something that you build over time. So once you build up your body of work beyond, 20, 30 blog posts, for example, you'll realize that the world will forgive you for whatever you'll do. And I think that's like a great foundational thing to have when you start, like, for example, planning for a book.
Yeah, I think books are very forgiving too. If somebody doesn't like a book, they typically stop. I'm still amazed by the people that finish a book they hate and then leave a comment. It's like, why are you spending so much time? But most people finish a book because they like it. And then if they're going to leave comments, it's usually positive. And I would say like the feedback I've gotten on my book has been much gentler and nicer and supportive than anything else. Because like posts on the internet are very easy to like attack, and often there's less work that's gone into it too. But yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thanks, Norma, for sharing as well. Thank you.
Any other reflections on that or questions?
I'll just add that I think that the longer the medium is, the more forgiving it is. Like you can start your ideas on Twitter and there's like a lot less effort and there's so much more volume. And it's almost like you kind of want to get attacked on Twitter so you kind of can get it out of the way and oh, that idea is spicy. And then you bring it to the blog format and even less people will read your blog. And if a blog post pops, that's a good sign that like, oh, that really has a lot of positive and a lot of negative. And then the barrier of people who will pay $10 for a book is even greater. So it's like there's probably some logic in like working up that funnel instead of doing it the other way. Like instead of blindly releasing the book, you kind of get a lot of the feedback, at least in a small group beforehand.
Yeah, I think it's topic choice too. Like my topic is just not that spicy. Like our relationship with work. It's emotional for people personally, but it's not something people get too angry about. And I also don't I don't play in. I could level things up and make it a lot more provocative, but I just don't. Like, it's not that interesting to me. But if your curiosity is like politics, like, I don't know what advice to give you. Like, good luck out there.
Something to think about here is that, as Michael said, the shorter the medium, the snappier the response, right? And when you have snappier responses, there's going to be a higher chance of, because it's easy, the barrier of entry to responding is a lot easier. So you're bound to have probably more negative reviews, but it is like what you said, Paul. It's building up to the medium of a book. So like from, small ideas shared to blog posts to something even bigger. It's an interesting playground or like a laboratory for things to be tested out there in the real world, seeing what potential responses there could be, and then refining from that point on, so that when you do actually launch the book for real, then you have this level of, there's like a certain confidence level that you have that this book has been tested multiple times. The structure, the writing, the content, the framing, the perspectives, that that you're bound to have those, once again, those clear boundaries of who are the kinds of people that you want to attract, because everybody essentially is like, the stuff that you put out there is a beacon for the kinds of conversations that you want with the people that you wish to attract. So small beacons will lead to these potential people to be, gradually attracted to you more. And then once you launch the big one, the book, then that you're narrowing down to exactly who you want. And you may have outliers, like these people who bother to pay $10 just to roast you at the end of it, which is, I think, not going to be the majority of your overall response. So once again, very forgiving, and definitely a lot more when it's a longer medium.
So I'm thinking it might be fun just to workshop a little if you're open to it with Trey. You said you have all these things that could be published as books. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Like, what is tactically holding you back?
Yeah, that's a good question. It usually becomes a time thing, I think. I move on to other projects and
Yeah,
then
I get that.
leave them in a box, where they could be returned to. And then simply don't return. Or haven't returned yet. I'll put it that way.
So are they online or like, what do you mean box? Is it a physical box?
Oh no, physical. This is stuff where I've been to libraries. I'll end up in archives with not every, I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that hasn't been digitized. A lot of what has been digitized is it's really more a product of how much money the library has. Has nothing to do with importance, except for, I guess, really important stuff would have been the first ones they did. But then after that, it's just whatever the budget is.
So what do you
And
have?
so,
What is the content? Do you have posts or something written?
oh no, no, it mainly gets, no, it's nothing I've shared online. If anything, there would be memos. Like I researched the University Board of Trustees, because it was just scandal prone. But nobody ever did a deep dive into it. So it's like I had a couple months one time. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna see what's here. I know you said you
You
were a
just like,
basketball.
yeah, you
Oh,
just
go ahead.
went deep on like what is a board of trustees and
Or what was the scandals with, like, quote unquote scandals, is basically had to do with college athletics. The trustees basically used it as their mini professional team. minus the major donations and capital required. And this is, you mentioned, I think you're a UConn basketball fan. I've listened to the first half of your book before this. So this is SEC sports. But one person basically got control of the trustees, and there was always something that would pop and then it'd leave the news cycle. And so so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to look into this. And this is when you'd what was it? A 2-term, which is 12 years minimum, or maximum to serve as a trustee. He made it 24 years. So it was just stuff like that.
Cool. So you're clearly passionate about the topic. I can see you coming alive while talking about it. What specifically, though, you said you want to do something with these. What is holding you back on that? Do you have something written? Do you want to learn more about online platforms? How to publish?
Yeah. I mean, when I did this, I can't even remember the time. This might have been 15 years ago now for this one. So there were online platforms were less of a thing then. Or certainly different than what it is now. And I just apologize. I'm too old. I forget when exactly things would change and emerge. But well, that actually got into my question was someone what's his name? Jason Crawford, who does progress studies. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He did a series, I don't know, 3 years ago, maybe. He's writing a book on progress over time, I guess. And so he did a 10-part, 12-part, I forget, series. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this basically each series is a chapter. This forces me to organize. You mentioned you had blog posts, which I don't think when you started your blogs, you were going to write a book.
No.
So, but once you were going to write a book, you had the blog post for that initial burst, at least. And then I think I've seen people, I'm sure somebody's done it, and I just can't remember. They've done a podcast series or whatever, and all right, I'm going to do a book, but I want to get these out there, to just as a first, just to get you going. And so I thought, I was that's awesome, because it's a lot easier to do a couple of podcasts than it is probably to start writing a book, and I don't know, maybe if at least as a first timer, I would think so, because it's, when you're writing or when you're doing a podcast, you're talking, and we can all talk, but when you're, with the blank page, it's that's a little different. So I was just, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think everyone's process is different. I think the one thing I would say is publishing a book is far easier than people think. There are also no limits on the shortness of a book. The Tao Te Ching is what's classified as a 1-hour read, right? I'll show you. Let me see if I can pull it up just to show you these things exist. Kindle short reads, 15-minute short reads, 30-minute short reads, 45-minute short reads. So my friend Kelly Miller wrote this book, Creative Dysregulation. She wrote it in a week, but I think there's more to the story. She's been writing for years and is just a really good writer. But it ended up being 87 pages. I think 20 to 25 of those are this survey she created. But yeah, it's listed in 2-hour self-help short reads. And so there's all sorts of books. You can just put something out, right? You can create a 10-page PDF and put it out there. I read one that was 40 pages, I think. It was about this guy that made a trek in Alaska, and it was just really cool short read. Now, that's a different question from will it be successful? How do you market it? are you actually excited about marketing it and things like that. But this is basically, do you guys want to see like how to format a book and upload it? I can,
Yeah.
Let's see. I will show you how to format a book and upload it in less than, let's see. I'll do this real time. I'll show you how quick it is to actually do this. I think this was a pretty shocking experience for me. I wish I had found out about this before publishing a book to realize how easy it is to literally put a document up that outputs a PDF anywhere in the world printed by Amazon. Let's see. I will open up my latest book. All right, so this is the latest book. I will download the Word doc, and then I will open up Vellum. So Vellum is the tool I've been using lately. I really like. Basically, you import a Word file, and it basically creates a book for you. So this is, you can see how it looked in Paperwhite, iPad, in print, and basically creates the book for you. Now there's some like basic formatting, which I can fix. But yeah, this is the book. And it's in there now. And like there's some basic formatting I would need to do, but this is it. And then you basically hit generate. Good word. Generate. I will do without this one. So now I have a book, and this is basically from a Word doc. So I can just open it in Apple Books, and there you go. It's in iBooks. And this is basically the file you would upload. Now you need to get ISBNs and stuff. But on Amazon, you get this portal, and you basically edit ebook content. They already created a pre-sale page. So all I would need to do is click yes, I have a file I would like to upload, and then upload. So I'd go in here, and I would go to Kindle, and I would just upload this file here. And that's it. Like there's a couple pages of like details, description, and entering your ISBN. And then you do pricing. And that's pretty much it. So this stuff is far easier than people think. It's also gotten a lot better in the last 10 years. And there's sort of a lag in the publishing world. Like there's so much prestige around the publishing industry because they've successfully created that aura around them that like people assume, oh, this must be hard. There must be more to it. And I was continually shocked throughout the process of like, oh, it's actually just like a PDF or EPUB file you upload, and then you can either hire a designer or not hire a designer, slap a cover on it, get an ISBN number, and then you're out there in the world.
I was gonna follow up with that. I kind of assumed that once you write it, that's the hard part, and that publishing had to be, if not easy, as in not an easy hard thing, but something that you could just figure out. However, the way you just went through that looks like it's almost too easy. I mean, it was just
Yeah, I mean,
it's like,
there are details that are confusing and annoying to figure out. But yeah, it's easier than people think, I think.
how long did it take you
Like
to write your book? Like, what was
about
that timeline?
14 months.
Okay. Because if you're
And then I
about to say
published
like,
it 3 days later.
okay. Because if you're about
I
to say
didn't
like
do it
14
once
days,
or anything. This current one took me about 6 months to write, but I would say like I basically tinkered for a year on a different book concept and ended up with like 55,000 words that I abandoned. So this second book really took probably a year and a half. But yeah, once I found the topic, I was a lot more confident and able to sort of execute the book this time. And I mean, I personally love self-publishing just because like once I'm done with the book, I can like put it out there. Um, I'm exploring talking with different partners this time, like Authors Equity, who does a lot more upside for authors. But to be honest, they're running like the same playbook as traditional publishers, and I just have more downside risk in that sort of model. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure all that out.
you mentioned you abandoned a book. Like, how is the process? Okay, you're 50,000 words in, and you're like, all right, something maybe feels off. And then you, like, how did you get to the point to, like, you actually abandon it? I mean, what was that emotional process like, or just in your head,
So I have like 4 or 5 documents open now that are technically book projects. And so I have like a book tab in Arc browser that's only books and writing. And so what basically happened is I got taken away by this other topic. I think I'll go back to that one now, and I think I could publish something probably next year on that. But yeah, I got so excited about this topic. Basically, what happened is with the second book, I was feeling really frustrated and stuck, but like still like, oh my God, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing than writing. This is so enjoyable. I love this. Why am I this crazy? So I basically had this question of like, how am I like my income's declining now, and like why am I still so willing to like commit to this? And so I basically decided to write about that. Like, why am I so committed to writing? Why is it so easy to commit, despite all the downsides and uncertainties? So I just like got excited about something else. So yeah, it was hard when I was stuck, but it was not hard once I was unstuck on this new topic to let go of the other one.
okay, so I mean, you use the word abandoned, but it's not necessarily, it may be abandoned forever, but probably not.
Yeah, there's stuff in there that could work. What happened is like I started with this other one, and then as that one grew and emerged, I actually pulled pieces from that one that I was excited about. So I need to go back and like check it. That one might be stripped dry of good ideas, but we'll see.
Okay, so I have one follow-up question to that, and this may be a dumb one, so like you're not going to hurt my feelings if it is, but can you compare abandoning the book to, do you ever like work on a blog post and abandon it, and how do the two compare, or do they not at all?
Yeah, I think I mean, for me, it's this emerging web of ideas. I'm still exploring the same topics and ideas. So everything kind of feeds into each other. I really just follow my energy though. It's not like I'm like failing, right? I think everything sort of like builds upon each other. Um, and I have this phrase like from my book is like nothing good gets away. And I sort of do believe that. I sort of embrace that as like, okay, the good ideas will pop back up and express themselves in some form. And like the biggest challenge is if I stop writing, right? So the thing I'm always solving for is how do I continue to create, remain excited about it, remain energized, build my life all around that. Yeah. Any questions from you, Billy?
Yeah, I guess kind of related to like, you know, getting taken by like a new idea. But I was just wondering for you, um, do you ever kind of have a bunch of like different, like disparate ideas that you're like interested in or like pursuing at the same time? Or do you feel like it's mostly, like you were saying, this like stuff is mostly connected and it's all sort of like one big web?
Yeah, I think there's a thread around like understanding how modern organizations work that is fascinating for me. That doesn't quite fit in like unconventional past relationship with the work world. I guess broadly, it's just like a fascination with like work and how we set up work and how we do work. Um, but yeah, I also write about like consulting skills and stuff from my consulting experience. Like I actually still do some consulting work training people on like storytelling and communication skills. So I do some work around that. It's pretty separate. I have like wanted to write a book around that stuff, but like I've just never gotten around to it. Um, but yeah, it's I would say it's a lot harder now that I have a daughter. There's just like less time to be like exploring random rabbit holes. So I have had to be more disciplined. Yeah, Michael. Yeah, just shout out your questions.
Cool. I'm wondering if you've read any essay books, which are a little different because they're presented as like a collection of, 20-page vignettes, and it covers a huge range of topics.
Yeah.
Like, do you think you need to consolidate everything into a big like theme that's legible, or do you think it works to just kind of publish a collection of like a mosaic of different things?
I mean, knowing your work, like your essays tend to be a lot more polished and higher quality than mine. I'd say the challenge I've had in doing that on my own is mine are rougher and like more interwoven. So like a book of essays is just like harder to pull off. And then when I start like improving each of the essays, I naturally get pulled towards like connecting everything. So yeah, I love essay books, but yeah, I just haven't been able to pull that off. I think it's just mostly the quality of my essays is probably lower. I sort of see online essays, blog posts, newsletters as like works in progress. And so like a lot of half-baked ideas, things I haven't fully thought through. I mean, reading some of your stuff, it's like you've like completely thought it through and like put it out there when it's higher quality. So that seems like it'd be more natural for your stuff.
Do you think, right? Because in that case, I've gone through the editing and feedback process. So they're kind of airtight, they're essays. Do you think at that point it's worth publishing those like a collection in the physical form, or it's like if it's a polished essay, it just belongs online?
I mean, like immediately thought of like David Foster Wallace's essay books. Like I've
Right.
loved his. Chuck Klosterman essays. Yeah, I've read many books that are like, if I like somebody's writing, I'll read like their stuff. I think like you do need like a cohesive name or idea so people
Sure,
can
like a
like
theme.
tell others about the book. But yeah, I why not? Like honestly, if you want to write books, like I think getting something out there is probably the most important thing. Because like you can just rework the book. You can upload a new file or like just publish a different version of it. There's really no rules. And I think we're just going to see a lot more creativity in this type of spirit in the coming years.
Yeah. Yeah, because I am working on like a more formal book that's separate from my essays. It'll be done next year at some point. But it's like, like I kind of could just publish these essays as a book, and like that could be a practice where every year I just take my best 5 essays and make a physical version of that. And that might be just like a fun practice to like cap off the year.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of Grantland used to. I don't know if you ever read their essays. Bill Simmons
No.
Sports. They had like a annual anthology. They would just publish. It was just blog posts they published on their website. It was like a really nice book. But yeah, it's still like the same thing. Someone else has been doing this on Substack.
Is it Elle Griffin?
Yeah, I think she's been doing that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I think you just will. So me, for example, like I literally can't read stuff online anymore. Like I don't think I've come across one of your essays or posts in I don't know how long. Just because like I have too much inbound.
Right.
It's crazy. But if you put out a book, it'd probably be an instant buy for me, and I probably would read it of your essays. Just because like it's a different form, it takes me off the computer, and it's a way for me to support.
That's such a great point.
And
Yeah, it's like we're so saturated that going physical is like an open space.
yeah, and I think this is the problem with like publishing newsletters now is just there's too many. Like I get less replies than I did 3 years ago.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'm thinking much more around like books. But yeah, and I think you can anchor a book around like one essay too, right? Like David Foster Wallace's book around the lobster. Like I remember that lobster essay.
Yes.
I don't remember what the rest of the book about, but like he named it that same title as the lobster essay and like did that. And then like if it flops or you don't feel good about it or you don't want to promote it, you just delete.
Right. You just sit in the backlog, right? You don't have to stake everything into it.
Well, no, I mean you can delete the book. Like you can literally just take the book down.
Right. I feel like that's the most extreme version, but the worst case is like, okay, I'm just not gonna put it in my bio anymore. You have to stalk it and find it.
Yeah. So yeah, it could be a cool way. Also, I think it's a good way if you are going to publish a book just to like play around with the platforms and also get an audience on those platforms. I'm guessing Amazon will recommend my second book to readers of my first book. Like that's just a good business decision for them.
I don't want to talk too much, so Billy or anybody else is more than welcome to jump in. But I had a follow-up to what Michael was saying, or no, what Paul was saying in relation to that. You mentioned going back to having too much inbound, having too many newsletters, Yeah, I finally had to do a spreadsheet just for Substack alone, and I mean it helped a little bit. But then I think I went 3 years maybe without buying a physical book. Maybe there's one in there. And then I realized I'm not consuming books anymore, other than the occasional audiobook. So I went back to physical books, which is part of the reason for the epic mess back there. But it's the only way I'm finishing a book. I'm
Yeah.
not finishing a PDF or something on Kindle. It's like, I mean, the amount of effort. But I want to get into a question about the formats of what we consider books. Is that what is there any work out there or even any interest from, I know everybody here is a reader, of having everything and having the book in one place, at least digitally, which is when it's all integrated from the audio to the print, that also includes the graphics and even the video and motion. It doesn't feel like, and I also want to add something to this. When I see a book with a lot of pictures, I'm buying the book. And it's not because I'm not trying to read, but it's just like if they've gone to the trouble to have the graphics, I'm like, I feel like I'm going to get so much more out of it because it's going to be triggers for me to remember. And I feel like as writers, and I know you're a writer and I'm not, so I don't mean no offense, but it's like, the more graphics, the better. And it's like, you don't see that often. And the exception would be when people write a book that's literally a graphic book. And I'm like, okay, well, those are great, but they just don't count for my example. Anyway, that was just the thought off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different kinds of readers. Ultimately, I think you need to surrender to like what is most creatively inspiring for you. There's so many opinions and takes on like what you should write and how to do stuff and things, and like I think I'm lucky in that I'm just good at like basically ignoring what most people say. And yeah, but I would say like I'm thinking a lot more about that. I'm actually doing a special edition hardcover of the Pathless Path right now. And there's going to be like cool illustrations and colorful pages and a really epic cover, and like it's going to feel really nice and open without like a weird binding like normal hardcovers and things like that. And then in my second book, I'm going to do like some stencil illustrations of like different scenes. And I'm hiring somebody for that. And then I'm going to do like quote pages. And then at the end, I'm going to do like a whole section of like riffs, which is basically like stuff that didn't make the book, but like really inspiring things for the book. And my bet is like, I find that cool. Other people might find it cool too. And like, I don't care that it's like, oh, you're not supposed to do that. Like, I'm always looking for like, how can we rethink or reinvent these things too?
Yeah, the playing with the format is one of the best parts about writing, where because of the explosion in creativity when you're writing a book, there are no rules anymore to what is a proper book. When you have these like best practices for what a book should be, that's normally touted by the major traditional publishing industries that want you to conform to a specific format because they want you to conform to a specific format because they believe that conforming to that format leads to the greatest audience, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the audience for you, right? Like for the memoir that I wrote, a lot of it is like half memoir, half poetry, and then at the end it's just notes of like random word counts, random paragraphs, even pictures, even sketches, etc. And Trey, this might be something for you to consider. Um, I wrote that book in a format that I would enjoy, and what I would enjoy is something more chaotic because something more chaotic is more humane, in my opinion. If you were to ever see that, ever said by any traditional publishing industry, I'm pretty sure they would be just exiled by other publishers. They would be thinking like, what the hell kind of book would this be, right? Because they cannot imagine it. But the unpredictability of it is what is enticing the audience that I would want, because I feel like the kinds of people that would read my stuff would love that, right? So it's all about trusting your audience would follow you on the same adventure that you once paved, or like you once went on that same journey to. And I think that's most likely why a lot of us are here in Paul's salon, that we want on that adventure to read the Pathless Path, and we're like, hey, we like the writing style, we like the emotional experiences, we like the personal stories, etc. And there was a lot to learn. So there we go. I think format is a very personalized, subjective opportunity for you to express who you are, and writing the book itself is secondary. I think writing the book is the proof of that format that you chose. So that's something for you to consider.
Yeah, and it's hard to understand, like, basically there are no rules.
Yeah.
And it's kind of overwhelming to realize that, because it is this massive project. It is something that might take over a year of your life, if not more. And to like make decisions that like feel like they're not reversible can be very stressful. And this is basically why nobody ends up like actually publishing. And so one of my goals is like to help demystify this and be like, hey, it's okay. You can publish.
One thing to follow up as well, Trey, you were thinking of somehow including podcasting in your process to write a book. As someone very heavily involved in the podcasting industry, I think I can share with you something. So there are a number of solo podcasts and conversational podcasts where they take a lot of the transcripts from those episodes, rewrite them into a book. Just like you said, as we use our vernacular to talk about these things and think out loud and talk out loud and explore questions and answers, you're actually, in a nutshell, doing notes in progress. And notes in progress become materials to be added into your book. A lot of people actually do it this way, right? Like ages ago, people would just talk into their voice recorders. They just talk to themselves for like 10 to 15 minutes every day. And then they use the voice memos and they use that as material for the book. That's why we have ghostwriters. And ghostwriters are actually the backbone of the majority of the publishing industry, because they interview the writers, the authors that they're writing for, record those interviews, and then use that as a material to write their book. So if maybe the true reason why you're considering this is because the act of drafting only in written form can be daunting. So if you're considering audio, it is a very, very good way to do it. So I would highly recommend it myself. Well, you're on mute.
I sort of used my podcast as a way to riff on ideas. I think I only ever interviewed podcast guests that interested me or I had questions I wanted to explore. And through those conversations, often ideas would emerge. And then on top of that, my weekly newsletter was like a way to also explore those ideas. So I was always like prototyping. I was talking about ideas in person with people, then like testing them on podcasts. I would sort of notice like, oh, people reacted to that. That's interesting. If I'm also interested, that's something I'm going to go deeper on. And then in writing, if people are like, oh, this is interesting, it's like, okay, this is a good sign. I'm going to keep exploring this, keep talking about this idea, keep shaping it. The phrase "the pathless path" I've been using since 2018. So I put it in like, I have a post where I talked about like navigating life without a map, and I just like had the quote in the post. But it was this idea I was telling people. People were like, "What are you up to?" I'm like, "I'm on a pathless path." So like my mom and stuff, she'd be like, "That's stupid. You should get a job." But to some people, they're like, "Ooh, that's really interesting phrase. I like that." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I found it super fascinating." Um, and so, yeah, I would just keep leaning into those things. And my writing was this very like lived experience of, "Ooh, how are these ideas playing out in my life, in my work?" So I'm always thinking about creative output as a way to test ideas and keep sort of evolving them over time.
Well, I thought I'd jump in here just to ask something um, that I'm personally interested in is you've written the book, you've refined it, you've published it. What was your thought process in marketing it? Or did you just have no plan? Was there a very pathless way of marketing it? Because I'm very curious about that part. So, yeah. Oh, you're on mute, Paul.
I had no plan. I had so little plan that I decided I would use the pre-sale period to come up with a plan. Like I bookmarked like 5 articles I would read about how to like pre-sale and launch a book. But then I uploaded the files, set the pre-sale on the Kindle 3 weeks out, and then uploaded the paperback and submitted it. The next morning, the paperback was live. And so I just said, screw it. We're moving the Kindle up. We're just going to do a 3-day pre-sale. I think I sold like 50 copies and I just released it. And probably a little crazy. Like I probably should have tried to pre-sell a little more. But I had been mostly pre-selling on Gumroad. I wish I had known you could pre-sell on Kindle earlier in the process, but like I really just focused on the writing. And when I published my book, like I really thought it would be like a break-even project. I spent like $7,000 on like editing, design, even I think it was like 4,000 editing, design, other costs. And I figured, okay, maybe if I break even, that would be cool. So I wasn't really prepared for what happened. I think I got lucky at a certain point when like people were still very online because of the pandemic. People were talking about work. I was early on the topic because traditional publishers still hadn't put out books on the topic until like a year later. Um, and so I sort of learned about marketing as I went. The couple things I did was like very personally, I just like reached out to people I thought might be interested in the book and like sent them a copy. Um, I also reached out to some people to try and get on podcasts. I'd say for the most part, that was not successful in my first year. Like no one took me seriously. Cold pitching podcast was not working. As the book gained momentum, I started getting on some bigger podcasts. And then mostly my only marketing was like gifting books. So as a self-published author, you can just like print your book and ship them to yourself for like $3.50 to $4 a copy. And so I've gifted probably 3,000 physical books to people. I've sent like copies to conferences. I sort of like play around and like, hey, who wants 50 books? I'll say that on Twitter. And if people volunteer, I just like send them 50 books. Say you can give them out however you want. I don't care. So I try to have fun. I leave copies all around. I'm still promoting the book. That way, like I'm in Boulder for a couple months this summer. I brought like 25 books. I'm gonna leave them around the city. I'm gonna leave them in the mountains. Then I take pictures of them, and like people love it. And it's also like so fun because like traditional published authors can't actually buy their book at cost. They have to pay half of list price because the publisher makes a margin on those books that the authors buy from them. which just cracks me up. So I have this like built-in advantage where I can just like keep doing this, and it's super cheap for me to do it. But yeah, it's that's mostly what I'm doing. For the second book, I'll probably try to reach out to some bigger podcasts. I'll probably get rejected again. I'll probably give up, and I'll probably just play the long game again. Keep talking about my book over time because I'm passionate about the topic, and then see where it goes. Yeah, I don't really have like launch energy versus long game energy is sort of how I play it, how I talk about it. So yeah, that's how I think about it.
The follow-up question then, this is something that I think I feel a bit, not sure what the word is, maybe conflicted is the right word. The act of just giving your books out for free, the like physical copies. Was that something that's always been in your mind, like when you were thinking about it, or was that just an experiment in the very beginning where you're just like, oh, I'll give a few and see how that happens, and then you saw stats, you saw like people actually organically talking about your book because they received it for free or something like that, and then you thought to scale that. What was your thinking around that idea at the time, and then like now that it's like a constant or a consistent part of your like marketing now, um, is that something you're
So
exploring for book two?
it's sort of a real principle I've embraced since the beginning of working on my own, which is that everything I create is free. Not free, a gift. So if you want my book, if you want the physical copy and don't have the means to support it, I'll send it to you. I will literally send my book to anyone in the world who wants it, who can access it. That is true for everything I create. My community, if you want access as a gift, all you have to do is ask and you can have it. My course I create for like consulting skills, if anyone wants it, there's a form they can fill out, name their gift offer, and I'll send it to them for whatever they put in. So it's sort of a spirit of like what I've really been embracing for years. And it's super fun just to like give my book away. And yeah, I just love sending it to people. I think one thing I noticed early on, about like 4 months in, I kept getting these emails that were like, I read your book, I just bought 3 copies for friends. And so there was a certain like virality to it, which is like, okay, more books out there, more books might sell. So if you can tap into like a virality of like people like your book, then they'll tell other people about it. Um, that is the upside of like sharing a lot of books. And so, yeah, I think people are starting to understand this more. Like Nat Eliason is launching a book, Crypto Confidential, last week, and like he actually had to like fight his publisher to like get more books to send to people. But he understood like actually gifting a bunch of books at the beginning would be great because if people liked it, they would talk about it. But you need to write books that people like. I've seen people with enormous audiences write books that are not that shareable or like not all that great, and they just don't really get shared that widely. Yeah, I think we're coming up on 3:30, what we were scheduled for. But yeah, happy to stick around more. Also, like feel free to reach out, ask other questions. I like helping people think through this, and talking about these topics. And yeah, hope all of you guys publish and share stuff too. Feel free to share stuff with me. More likely to engage with it if it's book form than newsletter form, but still, given that it's yeah, only have so much capacity.
Yeah, I'm gonna head off. It's 5:30 a.m. for me. Thought to catch this up with
Oh
you.
wow,
So,
where are you?
you know, really want to in Malaysia. other side of the world.
nice.
So, but I really want to support you. That's why I'm here. So I one genuine last question before I actually go to sleep is you said earlier you don't like listening to advice on writing a book. So what's your advice for writing a book that you would want, like, everybody here in the room would want to follow or consider, or even just have it in their mind space, so that when they're actually thinking about like drafting a book or drafting their next book, it's something for them to think about?
Yeah. So I would add to that and say it's not that I reject all advice from other people, it's that I try to index it to the kind of person giving the advice, right? I try to understand, like, why would they be saying such a thing, right? The reality is there's no like correct or right way to do something. With books, the traditional publishing world has shaped this is a book, 55 to 65,000 words this thick, takes 3 years, is about these topics packaged in this way. So I sort of am default skeptical of those things. But some ideas are interesting. And so mostly what I take from books is like other books I'm reading. So if I see books and I like what somebody's done, I take that as inspiration. So I sort of use reading as my input about what I like about books, because mostly I just want to like write books for people like me. And the advice I would give it would be like, just start, like open the document and start a book shaped project, right? And like your process of how you go beginning to end is something you need to figure out along the way. And try to release like all the shoulds in terms of what other people are saying. Oh, you need to start with an outline. Oh, you should just jump right in. Both of those are correct. And both of those are wrong, depending on who you are. Right? So you really need to figure it out. And yeah, it's that would be the advice, is like open the document and start a structure of something that feels and looks like a book. Vellum or Readsy can take a document and turn it into, Readsy's free. Take a document and turn it into something that looks physically like a book. That can be inspiring to people. Also on Kindle, you can upload a version and print a proof copy and ship it to yourself. Most people don't know this is possible. So you can get like a book feeling thing. This might be worth doing for you, Michael. Just like go to KDP, use the fake, like the like some fake ISBN for now, or you don't even need to enter it, and upload the document, print a proof copy, ship it to yourself, slap a fake cover on it or whatever, and just like see, how does it feel? Do you like this? Play around with it. So yeah, those would be the two things I think.
Awesome. All right, I'll head off. You all have a great discussion. Take care. And yeah, looking forward to the next book, Paul.
And hope to make it to Malaysia at some point.
Please do.
Keep you
Please do.
posted.
Take care.
Nice. Did you just do this on the call, Michael?
I did, yeah. I had 5 chapters. I'm like, let me just throw this in as we're talking. And I haven't seen it all collated at once. It's like, like
How's it
I probably
feel?
learned something it feels good. It's like, whoa, I have 75 pages already. Like I've kind of had the story where it's like, wow, I'm so behind schedule. I've made no progress after doing this. It's like, whoa, like I could basically just publish this,
Yeah, it's such a simple thing just to create like the book document.
Right.
And you kind of like poking around in a bigger sort of thing. I think it sort of expands your mind about how you're thinking about these. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the idea is like for new chapters, that'll still exist on its own. But then after I publish, that published piece now goes in the master doc.
Yeah. Do you want to drop it in the I can turn it into an EPUB for you in 30 seconds if you drop it in the
Yeah, let's do it.
chat.
It has a ton of images. I'm curious how that comes through.
So
Do you
download
need
it as
do you
a
need edit
doc.
access or download as
No,
a
just
doc? Okay.
download it as a doc and drop it in the Zoom chat.
This is wild. Doc X, okay.
Awesome. Good
All
seeing
right.
you, Billy.
Done. Okay, boom.
Okay, I gotta go, guys. Thanks so much, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks, Dana.
Bye.
All right, let's see.
I need to run as well, but this was awesome. It's good seeing you
Sweet.
guys.
Yeah, nice talking, Trey.
Hey.
Not letting me select the folder. So,
The file's not going into what's it called? Vellum.
oh no, here it is. It's being weird. It's not letting me click anything in the list.
There might be a few problems. One is that there's a lot of images. I don't know if that affects anything. And the other is some of the formatting. I'm just copying like comment sections from Substack into here. So I don't know if anything funky is happening.
No, I think it's my computer.
Got it.
I just restarted it. There we go. Yeah, it's formatting the stuff weirdly. But we have a file. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool to have this. I just got this book the other day. It's like on Euclid. It's like a math book, but I was kind of attracted by these like illustrations. And check this out, like
Nice.
the inside of the book, it doesn't even follow a consistent margin. You know, it's like really playful and colorful. And I'm wondering like, like there could be a road where it's like a visually unique thing, but that might just make it too complicated.
Yeah, there's so many degrees of freedom. It's almost overwhelming. And so
Right.
what most people do is sort of like, I mean, there's a reason there is sort of standards and norms, because people do like this kind of length book around topic Y, Z, or X. But yeah, I think there's a lot of room for innovation. Like self-publishing, I think just started getting good in the past 5 years. Like
Right.
these software interfaces were so bad before that and so convoluted that like you really needed to learn a ton. But now it's become so easy. But still, like most people don't publish books because it's hard and it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel like you're always pushing ground here, and I'm always inspired when I hear you talk about it. I think my next thing is like, so basically, this is the kind of thing where the structure is kind of done in advance. But there's like 9 sections of the book, and each one has 4 chapters. And I just finished like the first set of 4. So I'm thinking by Friday, I could have a printed proof. Is that true? Is it that quick where you can get like a proof in 2 days, or is it like a week or?
I think I forget which one was quickest. So you can print on like Lulu, or Ingram, Spark, or KDP. And Amazon might be a couple days longer. They definitely
Okay.
don't send the proof copies that quick, but you definitely could have something by next week, probably.
Okay. I think that's my takeaway from this call, like to see what it's like to have it printed and then see how that changes
Yeah,
my excitement about it.
Lulu.com, like just create like print books. I think you can pay for like fast shipping. You could probably get something by Sunday.
Cool.
Yeah, let me see. I have my projects. I have a draft here. I created like a blank like notebook just to see how it would, you know.
And when is your when are you aiming for your release for your second book?
Ship this, see how long it is. Probably the fall.
Nice.
I was had version one. I just talked to Authors Equity. Do you know them?
What's their name?
Authors Equity. It's the new company started by James Clear.
Oh wow. No, I haven't.
And so like they offered me to publish with them, but like basically what they're doing the same thing as traditional publishers, but they don't do any advances. But you get 70% of profits. And so the royalties you get are probably similar, if not higher, like only for the audiobook actually, than self-publishing. But you have all the downside risk. So basically they want to spend like a ton of money on like editing, book cover design, PR. And so they quoted me something that was like $120,000. Now I don't have to spend any of that money, but I'd have to sell 20,000 books before I made a single dollar.
Right.
And so it's like, do I really want to do that? Because if I sold 20,000 books and then it sort of like flatlined, self-publishing, I'd make about 100 grand. With them, I'd make $0.
Right. It's kind of like you start in debt, like from day one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna push back and like basically tell them I'm publishing this book. If you want to do a print only, you can take my book. There will be no editing or design. But I don't know if they'll do that. We'll see. Yeah, it's very much like there is a playbook. Like the founder, the CEO is former Penguin CEO. So they're basically just running the same playbook. To me, it's really boring and overpriced. And there's probably an enormous amount of waste in the money they're spending. Like if you're Ali Abdal, for example, maybe it makes sense to like spend 100 grand, 100, 200 grand on like all these professionals. Cause you're definitely going to sell 20,000 books.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you have a YouTube distribution plan. But like, I don't know if this book will do better or worse. Like, I don't know. Plus, it's like, I started cringe thinking about having to do a huge launch. Like, I don't have that energy. I just want to like publish my book, put it out there, talk about it on a few podcasts, and let's start writing a next book.
Right. I feel like you've pioneered the whole self-publishing angle, and it's like you've been able to explore like the idea of like leaving books on the mountains. Like I could see just like the publishing agency like not being behind that. And I just wonder if there's like pressure to hit this quota. It's like I can just see it being like kind of suffocating. I'm curious if you think like Infinite Books or Altamira, like are there any like indie publishers that are like favorable to smaller creators?
Yeah, so Altamira is basically self-publishing with some editing and coaching services is part of
Got
it,
it.
right? She is working with her own printer, right? But then like printing and distributing physical books is like actually pretty complicated, especially if you're doing it globally. Right now, like I'm just happy that Amazon's doing that. Now, like Otterpine, who I think is going to be working with Infinite Books, I think they're great. But it's the same thing. Like you need to spend a ton of money funding the printing. For Amazon right now, I don't have to spend any money. Like somebody hits buy, they print the book and ship it to them in 2 days.
That's incredible.
So anytime you move to like print your own books, there's risk, right? Book might go out of stock. You need to think about logistics. They're dealing with Amazon directly. Their fees may vary over time. They need to get books to like multiple countries. That's just very complicated and hard.
Right.
And so like part of it is like, yeah, it's really like what you want. And like things are continuing to change. But yeah, print books are just like a hard logistics and supply chain challenge. So I am doing my physical hardcover. I'm doing like a nicer version with Otterpine.
Cool.
Yeah, I think Infinite Books will probably be the most interesting just because like Jim is like an internet bro and like
Right.
doesn't give a fuck about the institutions. So I could see them doing some interesting things that don't make like financial sense. But yeah, it's just a hard thing to do if you're printing your own books. So in like author's equity, they sent me a financial model. They project that, so they discount the hardcovers 55%. So it's a $30 book. They sell it to the retailers at $15. They then adjust that for assuming 20% of the books will be returned. So like
that's weird.
The publisher has to take risk for books not selling, right? Because the bookseller has leverage because they're the only major retailer chains. There's not many. There's like Target, Walmart, and Barnes and Noble. And then so you get paid like all after that. So you're still at 70%, you're still only making like $7 a book, which is about what I make on my own. And so it's just like a lot happening behind the scenes. And so like I just like I'm fine with my book not being in bookstores. Like I don't give a fuck. Like,
yeah.
Like I don't care. Like it's not a big deal. It's all ego. And like once you work past the ego, like you can just sell your book anyway.
Have you thought about just leaving your books in Barnes and Nobles, just like finding a shelf and just like putting them there like for free?
I've left my book in, so I sell my book in consignment in Book People, and it keeps selling out, which is cool.
Nice.
Like theoretically, like a bookseller should want to sell my book because it keeps selling out in like the book.
Right.
But like I don't even know how to access that channel. Every time I go to search it, it's like this convoluted web of relationships, and like I think it's meant to be confusing on purpose, just to protect the status quo.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't even buy books. I've never bought a book in a bookstore in like a decade. So it's sort of just designed around like what I actually do.
Right. Yeah, I buy a lot off Amazon. I've been going back and forth. I've been on an essay book binge. I've probably gotten like 30 essay books this year, and a lot of them are in stores. But
nice.
I don't think most people do that. And I feel like the key way to partner with somebody would be like editing and design and marketing. But like self-publishing, it seems like you just cut all the bloat and you make basically, I don't know what percent you make on each book, but it just seems a lot more straightforward and like There's no weird incentives.
Yeah, well, you can adjust the pricing. I mean, I just put out I'm putting out a big post this week on 50,000. I just put out a video. I share all the data. I make about like $7.50 on a paperback book through Amazon, $8 on hardcovers through Ingram Spark, which I now figured out how to get put on Amazon to do Prime shipping. And then Kindle, I price at $4.99, mostly because like sales increase more to like break up the difference. So like
Right.
I actually sell way more Kindles because I can price more competitively. Traditional publishers will not publish below $14.99 for their Kindle books because they're just like they think it's bad form to like undercut and
Yeah.
sell more digital. They're so obsessed with print books and pleasing their print partners that they put all their effort towards like print distribution and sales. I think it probably harms authors. Like I think authors would probably sell more books if they put more effort into the digital, but like I don't know. It just keeps marching on. Things can
Yeah.
stay stupider longer than we can imagine.
Cool. Well, this was yeah, thanks for your time here. Lots to chew on. I feel like I'm like I climbed, I don't know how many phases there are, and like when you realize you're writing a book, but I think I just elevated at least one tier.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, well, keep me posted. Yeah, we'll definitely be excited to support in any way.
Yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, likewise, as you're working on number two, let me know if there's anything I can do. I mean, I haven't really edited like book length stuff, but like I'm gonna read it anyways, so I'd be happy to check out like in advance if you just wanted like a skim and some general comments.
Sure. Yeah, I will. I've like created a list of people that have offered to help. Yeah, I usually send it to a bunch of people, and then a lot of people just can't like spend time with a book, especially in digital
Totally.
form. But yeah, I will add you to the list and probably reach out in the next month or so.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Good seeing you,
Yeah.
Michael.
Good to catch
See
up.
ya.
I'll see you around.